take a picture of it, and then go process it later. But that's where we're headed tonight. So, in the beginning, I just want you to know we have Kathy back here. She's going to be passing around. Hopefully, it'll get to all of you. If it doesn't, there's going to be a sign-up sheet out there. And basically, put down your name and email on this sheet if you ever want to hear from us again, because it's the only way that I can find you, is to have your contact information. We don't send you weird stuff, just invites to the course that we have, and then also we send out parent advice and tips every now and then, so if you want to receive those, then just give us your email. All right, so we're going to be talking about teens in the modern world, and I have to tell you that I do not envy any of you parents trying to navigate the time that we're in, because it is pretty much the first time that parents have had to figure out how to parent in such a digital age. And when we got your questions, that was a lot of what you guys are worried about, is how do I parent in a digital age? So hopefully we'll touch on that a little bit. Can I have a remote, or should I just tell you guys next? All right, next. Okay, here's where we're headed. So we are going to blast through what we're seeing in adolescent culture, and then we're going to talk about, I want to sit on what motivates the behavior, then we'll land at what parents can do to help. Next. Okay, so I reached out to two of my friends who are administrators, counselors at high school, and these are the two things that they said they saw. So vaping is a huge issue. If you have a teenager, you know this. Can I just ask a question real quick? Raise your hand if you have elementary school age. And then raise your hand if you're middle school. Nice. And high school. Perfect. Everyone has everything, it looks like. That's great. So vaping's a huge issue, so is cyberbullying, usually via social media. Also sexting, which they don't think they're doing because they're sending nudes instead. Yes, we'll get to that. And then our teens are struggling with family dysfunction, divorce, and loneliness, and they have connection but no community, as you've seen. All right. So anxiety and depression are two things that you're probably pretty familiar with. These are the top two that when we look at adolescent culture today, kind of the catch-all is like anxiety and depression. And these are really hard to navigate because a lot of times you wonder, how do I differentiate between true anxiety and depression versus just teen moodiness, angst, developmental drama, if you will? And a lot of times these two are clumped together, but I want us to take note of how they're actually different. So anxiety is not depression. Depression is not anxiety, but a lot of times they occur together. So anxiety is worry, it's fear. Depression is those feelings of severe despondency and dejection. And our counselors can talk more about that if you have questions. But you'll see in that chart, this was a survey of 13 to 17-year-olds, and they were asked, what are the major problems that you see among your peers? And the highest was anxiety and depression. All right, this is an interesting one, and probably why so many of you send your questions about social media. There is no question that since cell phones have come out, social media, all of this, it has really, really increased levels of depression in teenagers. And so this is from the UK, but I would say it applies here as well. But this looks at how many hours a day they're spending on social media and then how that affects their depression. And something that you'll notice too is that girls with depression just tends to be overall higher than boys or boys and girls. Okay, addiction. So pause real quick. I just chose general, like these are things that we're seeing. And so I can't touch on everything, but I'm just gonna give you the biggest things that we see. And these in no way can define every kid, cover every circumstance. This is just like a blanket of what we see going on. And I'll add to that, we all work in this area. So these are things that we see kind of in this community. So vaping is so interesting. I have this note here, let me find it. Okay, U.S. Surgeon General's report, e-cigarette use by high school students has increased by 900%. So in 2016, the National Youth Tobacco Surveys 1.7 million high school students and 500,000 middle school students reported using e-cigarettes in the past 30 days. And that's a 2016 statistic. Hopefully that's changed a little bit as teenagers maybe become a little bit more aware of what is in their e-cigarette and what that actually involves. So at the time that this statistic was taken, 66% of teens believe that their vape is just flavored vapor. And I have for sure seen that belief in action, in the sense that you have these really, really good kids. I think that's how they would define themselves. They're really straight and narrow in their grades and in their behavior, and they're kind of always on the up and up, yet they get caught vaping. And then it throws them into this spiral, but they didn't know that it wasn't fine. So you have these really, straight edge kids also vaping just because there's not enough education around it. But we're moving towards kids understanding what it actually is. And this is such a big thing too, because so many kids are vaping that they don't know that it's not normal. If you see all of your peers doing something, it's hard to identify, is this a healthy behavior? Is it not, if they're all doing it? And then our next statistic, which we will address later in our Q&A, 9 out of 10 boys and 6 out of 10 girls are watching pornography. If you have young kids, like our elementary school age kids, I don't want you to ignore this statistic because it starts really, really young. There are some studies and surveys that talk about pornography use starting as young as 8 years old. And this makes sense if you think about it. Your cell phone, right, is just constant access to this whole world of online technology. You used to have to seek it out. You used to have to look for it. Maybe you found it under your parents' bed or somewhere that you had to really look, but now it's just there, it's in their hands. And a lot of times they find it on accident. It finds them, if you will. And then even if you're doing a really, really great job in your household with this stuff, there's no guarantee that they won't see it from a friend. So we'll talk about a lot of that, but that is I think that that's a really important statistic, because if we look at the deeper root of that, pornography is now defining how kids see love, how they see safety, how they're addressing their relationships, what they consider a safe sexual encounter. I saw a study recently that says, on average, and again, I don't know how wide their net was, but that the first encounter with sexual violence is between 15 and 16 years old. So that's why you're here tonight, is to learn what's happening, but then also how you can get involved. And the role of a parent is so important. You guys have such a role in your households, and you can teach your kids about what's safe and what's not, and they need you. So it's good that you know what's going on. And then 20% of youth 12 to 20 report current alcohol consumption. I would say that statistic is super low. I don't think that it's 20, I think that it's more. Okay, next. Okay, so this is one of those slides that I want you to get out your phone and take a picture of it. I surveyed some of the teens that I know and that I teach, and I just asked them, hey, how do some of these things affect your life, and how have you seen it affect your friends? And they obviously had a lot to say about it. So you can do that. I think it's so interesting, this bottom one, is she was saying, I feel like it's hard to hold an actually genuine conversation. I feel like I'm only allowed to talk about partying with people to stay relevant. Partying and hookup culture is such a big thing at school. Even though I don't participate, I've become numb to people telling me about their experiences, instead of people asking, how was your day yesterday? They ask, how blacked out were you last night? It makes me sad that I feel like partying is more the college culture than going to class and getting a degree. So she's a college sophomore, but we'll go back to that point about staying relevant, because that is very important. And then for sure, take a picture of this one as well. It's obvious that these are things that these kids are very passionate about. They had a lot of words. So I just copy and pasted what they said. You'll get their tone of voice, you'll get all of that in there, but maybe this will be a good opportunity to talk to your kids about some stuff, hearing it from a teenager as well. But the general consensus of those 3 pieces of feedback are that it's very, very difficult for them. And one of the things that this girl touches on is everyone wants to be loved, to feel belonging, to feel accepted, especially from our peers. And so that is one major thing we'll talk about tonight. Okay, the social media generation. 8% of 8-year-olds with cell phones have sent a sexually provocative image by text. 30% have received a nude or nearly nude image on their phone. 60% experience psychological distress. They're getting low sleep, greater exposure to cyberbullying, decreased physical activity, which you can imagine. And then this one I thought was interesting. If parents actually knew what happens on social media, 54% of teens said they would be a lot more worried about it. All right, so that is the tip of the iceberg. And so I want you guys to think visually. Can we actually go back to, I think it was I'll let you know when, second to first slide, maybe. There we go. Okay, this iceberg image, I forgot to touch on it. So you all have seen the iceberg analogy. There's some stuff at the top, and then all of it lives at the bottom. Even though that's an overused analogy, we're going to use it tonight because this is so true for how you can engage with these topics. So everything that I just blasted through, the social media, the porn, the alcohol, the vaping, all of that, anxiety, depression, that would live on that top part of that iceberg. These are things that for the most part you can observe, you can see, and you're encountering. Like you see it happen tangibly in your teens, so it feels like that's the thing that you need to address. I need to address their phone, I need to address their vape pen. But what I want to challenge us to think about tonight is actually what's underneath, because a lot of the time the stuff on top is merely a symptom of what's happening underneath, and that's where I find that parents and teenagers miss each other. Like really, really miss each other. Is the parent is talking about what's happening on top, teenagers like, oh, you don't get it. But what we're not getting is what's happening like all the way down at the little bottom. So, yes, we can go back to where we were. Yes. So as I've had conversations with kids, and I actually don't think I introduced myself. Jamie did. But hi, I'm Krista. And what we do at Girl Above is we try to bridge this gap of what kids experience in culture, in their lives, versus truth, living countercultural, gospel messaging, and health. So these two generally don't align. What they experience in culture and at school is not what they might be experiencing in your home and not the values that you're trying to teach them, and it's probably not aligned with gospel messaging. So that's what we try to do, is bridge this gap. And I've been working with youth since I was a teenager, and I started seeing a lot of these problems when I was teaching 8th grade science, and teaching middle school was very enlightening. It was fantastic. But as I've learned, this is kind of how I would sum this up, is you have all this ambition, all this passion, you want to change the world, you want to be unique, but you don't know what actually gives you purpose. You don't know where to find your worth. And then on top of that, you have no core value system to operate out of, and so now we're kind of stuck. What do I do with the fact that I want to be unique and different, but I'm terrified of actually living in autonomy? So that's the tension that we're going to address. Those are some of the things that live on the bottom of the iceberg. They're finding purpose in all of the wrong areas, like all of the wrong areas. So, okay. What are the motivators? Now we're going to dive under to that bottom part of the iceberg. And if you guys hear anything tonight, hear that this is where I want you to live in your parenting. Like, set up a tent and move into it and then live there. Because these are the issues that you're actually trying to address in your teenager. Maybe you don't know it, but these are going to be just some of the things. If you can figure out how to access these things and have a conversation about these things, you will get so much farther than just disciplining the behavior that you observe. Okay, so some of the motivators can be developmental. We're still dealing with teenagers. We're still dealing with people who psychologically are not fully developed. And I'll let our counselors speak on that more if you guys have questions. So some of what you see is normal adolescent behavior. But how do we know what's normal versus what's concerning? All of that. And then family dynamics, values, history. That will all play in what are the values of your family? You communicated those. What are some of your genetic histories? How do those play in? And then a drive towards unattainable excellence. I will tell you, this is one thing that we see in this area a lot. I can't speak for other areas of town because I live here and work here, but this is like the crux of a lot of things, is this unattainable achievement. We're a very achievement-driven culture where they are living in a space of perfectionism, just trying to nail it all the time. And then within that is this desire for acceptance and lovability, and we don't want to downplay that because it's so important. And again, this goes with that social media piece. We spend a whole week on this in our course and talk about it at length, but one of the things that's important to understand about social media culture is this isn't just a side piece to your kid's life. It's not an add-on. It is where they live and exist. That's how their social currency happens. That's how they communicate with their friends. And it's almost like they're stuck between two worlds, living in their social media world and then like coming to dinner to sit at the table with the family while still having one foot in this life and one foot over here. So imagine, take yourself back to high school. I like to think about it this way. When you were in high school, we've all had interesting experiences in our adolescence. And we've all encountered rejection, and we've all encountered critique. Now imagine if that never, ever, ever left, and it just followed you home. For the most part, when you were growing up, you could leave school, go home, and kind of let it go, leave it behind you. This follows them everywhere. Everywhere. It's always there. If someone wants to pick at them online, they can do it at 2 a.m. And they can do it while they're doing homework. And they can find them at all times. And it's really hard for teenagers to know how to set those boundaries. And then on top of that, there is an actual tally system for their social hierarchy and rank. So every time they post a picture, post a snap, do all of these things, it tells you how many people like it, how many people are responding to it. So that has set up a comparative system that we have to be able to understand in order to understand where they're coming from. So they're constantly putting on a show, and constantly evaluating, okay, am I enough? Are people seeing my good side? Are they seeing how much fun I'm having this weekend? And then they get to actually see when they're left out of things. If people go out without them, post stuff, and they see that they were left out. So this social media piece is not to be ignored, because this is a lot of what drives their worth and their value system. And then lack of coping skills. Angie and Alex can speak on this as well. But to a degree, something that I've seen is when you live in a social media land, it kind of creates this other world, this other dimension where everything seems great and fine and fun and everybody's beautiful and they never have bad days and they've just got it all together. And so I think after a while they come to believe that life is all good. It's expected to be all good and all shiny and all beautiful. And then when they encounter hardship or setbacks, it's really disorienting. Because am I weird? Am I not supposed to feel this way? Am I the only one who's going through this? So it makes it hard to understand how to put resilience into what they're seeing online. All right, and here's the big one: outsourcing their worth and core values. This is almost where all of the work we do in Girl Above sits, because the more and more I talk to girls and hear from them, the more I realize that this is kind of the downfall of their hearts and souls. In the sense that everything is externally motivated. So it's really hard to find, okay, how do I find my identity? What am I putting my identity in? And most of the time it's external. I'm gonna put my identity in whether or not this person likes me. I'm gonna put my identity in my grades. Did I make the team or not? And these things aren't just circumstantial things, they become identity things. So if I didn't make the team, I didn't just not make the team, I am a loser. If I get rejected by the boy, it doesn't just mean I was rejected by that boy and I can, I'm worth enough to find another boy. It's I am unlovable. I am unworthy. So all of their worth is put into this public opinion, public perception, and then mix that with a lack of core values. So I was leading a group this fall of girls, and we did a lot of work around core values. And how do your core values relate to and correlate to how you experience peer pressure? And this was like enlightening to them, because they couldn't put together, yes, it's so hard to say no to things that you don't want to do, but do you know why you don't want to do those things? Well, no. And do you know what the other option is? Well, no. And so we had to identify, what do you stand for? What are your values? What's your center? So that when these things come along, you know whether or not it's violating a core value. If you don't have your values established, if something comes along and you feel violated, but you can't put words to why, then that makes it hard to make good decisions. So we did a lot of work around core values, and I don't know how you guys address core values in your family, but if there aren't those strong, established core values in your family and within your child, it leaves a really open door for their peers to establish their core values for them, or for the internet, or for TV, or for kind of whatever they come into, to establish this is what matters, and it should matter to you because it matters to culture, and this is how our friend group operates. And then all of a sudden, they share these values that they might not have held otherwise. So it's really important to have them start thinking about that, and their core values will change. The core value of a 15-year-old is just different than the core value of a 30-year-old, and that's okay. So these are the items that are underneath that iceberg. For the most part, if you're seeing funky behavior or outbursts or stuff that you don't love in your teen, remember that it's a symptom. Chances are it will tie back to one of these or more. These are only a few of the things that drive us. But a lot of it, so much more of it, is tied to worth and value than you would ever imagine, and social acceptance and how their friends see them. So if you're just thinking as you sit at the dinner table and your kid's just like glued to their phone, there's a reason for that. There's something happening in that little universe that they're trying to manage, trying to uphold, trying to do. So think about if you have a favorite novel, you know how it is when you open that book and you're like transported to that place and you are sucked into it while you're reading. Then you close the book and you're like, oh, I'm still in my house. Okay. So that's how it is, except imagine if the things that you read in your novel actually affected your life. So if you're reading a murder mystery, and whether or not they pick up the weapon or make a choice, if when you close that book, it affected your family and your day and your life and your finances, you would be a lot more into that book, and you would try to control the characters, and you would say, no, don't do this, and we want to do these things this way because this is how I want my life to work. That is this whole universe that is happening, but all we see is just the looking at the phone. So always look underneath the surface. Next. Okay, generally, anytime you see a concerning behavior in your adolescent, the behavior itself is the symptom of an underlying cause. Investigate that cause, and you may find that it leads back to a deep place of shame, anger, fear, or worth. That is our takeaway, because that is how you as a parent can get involved with your kid. This is your most powerful, powerful, powerful tool in engaging your teenagers, is saying, how can I, through my relationship with them, dig and find that place of shame? And we know this as adults too. Sometimes you'll just start crying in your car, and you're like, why am I crying? And then you realize, oh, I was actually really angry about this thing that happened, or something might have happened a few months ago that's just now making its way out, or you're incredibly embarrassed, or you're carrying around shame. We even see this in ourselves. We don't just have behavior for the sake of behavior. There's always something driving that behavior. Okay, what parents can do. These are just a few things. Yes, pull out your phone. That would be great. Okay, so dig for the root. This goes back to that iceberg thing. You are going to become diggers. You're going to sit with your kid and talk, like, what's motivating that? Why do you feel this way? Let them just talk until you're like, there it is. There's the root. Found it. And then address that thing, because that's the thing that needs healing. So it helps your child feel truly heard. It helps address the real problem. And that's what you want to do, is you want to address the real problem. You don't want to run around in circles over something that isn't going to help move your family forward. Helps to inform your discipline and approach to solutions. So you know if you're dealing with this thing, you're going to approach it different than if you're dealing with this thing. Half the time we think we're dealing with this, but then the actual problem's here. So you want to find the right solution, and it builds trust and relationship. So if your kid knows that you can handle the stuff that they're going to tell you, that builds incredible amount of relationship and trust. So build deep relationships, foster a sense of unconditional love. So that means, does your kid know that they are lovable no matter what they do, no matter what grade they get on the test, no matter what happens socially, no matter what piece of information they bring to you, no matter how much it makes you panic? Do they know that you are going to love them no matter what? That is so huge. And sometimes kids need to hear it. So you might be like, of course they know this. Well, make sure you tell them that, because I've seen so many kids be like, oh, they only compliment me or acknowledge me if I do X, Y, and Z. So do they know that they are loved for who they are, not what they do? This is so important, because then they'll come and tell you everything. And you want to know everything. As a parent, you want to know everything, which requires you to make yourself fully available and have them know that they can bring the yuckiest stuff to you and you'll still love them. Then they'll bring you all of their stuff. Keep all lines of communication open. Make yourself available to talk about the hard stuff, and get to know your child. What really motivates this person? What do they love? What are they really interested in? What makes them tick? And then I wrote stay in the game with emphasis on stay. So a lot of times when you have a newborn baby or a toddler, you're in that mode of teaching your kid. You have to teach them not to run into the street. You have to teach them how to interact with people socially. You have to instruct them and give them so many lessons. Take yourself back to when you had like a newborn to 5 years old, how often you were teaching, because you knew that that was your role in that season. And then sometimes as your kids get older, we go a little bit more into passivity observation mode. And so I wrote stay in the game, because you are still an instructor to your child. You're still their number one coach, and there are so many things that they don't know that they need you to teach them. Otherwise, they'll be taught by other 15-year-olds, which tends to be disastrous. And then where am I? Okay, so your child is going to learn, they're going to learn about intimacy, sex, drugs, problem solving, and faith from somewhere. If they don't learn it from you, who are they going to learn it from? Seek support and hold your role. So hold your role to me means you are the parent. Their coach is not their parent. Their teacher is not their parent. Their counselor is not their parent. You are their parent, and you are so equipped and capable and able to parent this child. You know them, and they were given to you. That was not a mistake. So hold your role. And then don't freak out. This is a big one. Really don't freak out. So teenagers do a lot of their own freaking out, and their friends do a lot of freaking out, but they can't put words to it, and then there's a lot of angst behind it. If they can bring stuff to you, even if you're internally panicking and all of your red lights are like, I'm sorry, what did you do? Okay, that's great. You're gonna shove your feelings for that moment. And I'm serious, if you can put on your poker face and you're like, that is so interesting, tell me more about that. That's the place you want to be. That is so the place you want to be, even if it feels so uncomfortable to you. This doesn't mean don't address it. This doesn't mean don't implement discipline. But again, keeping those lines of communication open and you being the safe person means that you might have to sometimes okay, great, yeah, let's talk about that. And then it keeps the line of communication open. After they've told you everything, then you can do your solutions and discipline. Find the support that you need. Parenting at any season, especially with adolescents, can be a whole whirlwind. It can be completely crazy, and it's easy to get sucked up in their little cyclone of schedule and needs and friendship drama and school. And then before you know it, you don't even know who you are because you're kind of blended in with your teenager. So if there's stuff going on, find the support that you need to be able to separate, okay, this is their life, and this is my life, and this is what they're going through, and this is how I'm going to stay healthy. That's really important. Stay solution-oriented. Land the helicopter. We sometimes say this as a joke because it is good. It is really good for your kids to develop problem-solving skills. Sometimes you wonder, when do I step in and protect and kind of take the lead where they can't? And then when do I just hands off? And if that is a question that you have about how do I do that, when do I do that, save that for our counselors. But for the most part, land the helicopter and see what they do. Be curious about how are they going to handle this. And then if they handle it really well, that creates a topic of conversation. If they don't handle it super well, it's a learning experience. They've developed character, and it's a topic of conversation. And then listen. This one is everything. Listen to them. Find the bottom of that little iceberg so that you can have the right conversation. A lot of times they don't know why they're so stressed or know what's happening. If you can listen long enough to pull it out of them and hear what they're saying, that is everything. What's our next slide? Okay, this is a fun one for you guys. But this is really, really, really important, is address your own mental health. When you have teenagers, especially if they're in their really prickly, kind of stabby phase, that tends to poke at wounds that you have, things that are maybe unsettled within you, or sometimes you're like, I just don't know what to do right now with this, or I feel exhausted, but I can't put words to it, or I'm noticing that every time my child talks, I'm just agitated. Chances are there's something in you that needs to be addressed, and this is okay. It's okay to work on what you need to work on and then be able to, out of the overflow of that, parent your children. So I cannot say that enough. You being a healthy parent will help your kids. It just by nature will, because you modeling all of these things, you being able to stay present with them, being able to be emotionally healthy, model emotional health, gives them so much support and helps them understand, okay, my mom or dad is doing their own work and they're not perfect. It's okay for me to not be perfect. It's okay for me to make mistakes and for me to grow. All of these things are interconnected. Okay, I flew through that and I finished exactly on the minute that I wanted to finish. That was fantastic. Okay, so I told you that I had to just fire hose it and blanket it. We go through each of those sections at great length in the course that we do. Jamie mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but that was the fire hose. So thank you for listening to that. We're going to step into a time of Q&A. So I'll bring up Dr. Angela Wall, and she is a school psychologist with Littleton Public Schools, working with elementary through high school all the way. So she knows all of the things that are happening. And then Alex Avila, he's also a therapist in the area, working with families, working a lot with men, young boys, but also girls. And so they can answer whatever you need. And Jamie's going to kind of facilitate this.
Krista, that was awesome. We're gonna actually Krista wanted to do a little exercise right before we jump into the Q&A, right, Krista? Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure. But you know what? First of all, I just want to say thank you, Krista, because at Journey we have pastors and people that want to help out, but we're not the experts. We haven't been through the training that they have, and so we want to make sure you have resources right here within our church with people that are experts in this field. And the thing I love about Krista is I've known her for a while now, and she's in the trenches every day with our kids. I have a 14 and 17-year-old, and she's working with them. She's actually still cool enough for kids to talk to her and want to relate with her. And we're parents sometimes. I know for me, I'm just not that cool anymore. And she has an opportunity in a unique way to hear from them, to love on them. And she loves Jesus, like with her whole heart. And I just love that about knowing that she's the one with her team that's going to be able to pour into our children if that is the opportunity that we have. So I was furiously writing down a bunch of notes, and I wanted to share that with you. One thing I wanted to ask you is maybe those slides, if we could get those afterwards. Would you guys find some of those helpful? If we could get them and email them to you, I think that would be great, if you're okay with that. And then, so the exercise, let me put this down. The little exercise that we had for you guys is to just take 5 or 10 minutes right now. You can even discuss amongst yourself. Feel free to talk, and create noise and or just be silent. But there was 3 questions for the next 5 or so minutes, 10 minutes that we wanted for you guys to just think about and even prepare. We got a lot of questions ahead of time. But these are the 3 things in your mind. Think about, what does my child need the most help with? What area maybe? If you saw some of the things that she was sharing, where do you feel like, man, that one really struck a chord? That's where I feel like my child needs the most help. How can I grow as a parent to help support my child? Those are things that I love that you addressed that, Krista, because as we're healthy, then our kids are going to be more healthy. We talk about that. Leaders get healthy, then everyone they lead is healthier. And so as parents, where do I need to grow? And we're not going to share these out loud. It's just something for you to process and think about, that as the Lord leads and puts on your heart, go ahead and write that down. And then just be thinking about maybe a question that you'd have for the next segment. And so as you're writing too, and as you're thinking through for these next 5, 6, 7 minutes, we're going to begin to think about the questions. I have a few here that were prepared ahead of time by you guys. They're going to remain anonymous for this section, but there were some great questions. So thank you for those of you who put those down. So those are the 3 things for the next few minutes. Just take a few minutes, write it down. Where does you feel like your child, where is God leading you that your child needs the help the most? How can I grow as a parent? And then what question do we have? So just take a few minutes right now to do that, write that down. We don't want to miss this opportunity, okay? Okay, guys, we're going to kind of come back together for this is, I think, one of the things we missed at the last parent talk was opportunity to really engage you. Rick did an amazing job, gave so much great information, but we wanted to actually, and I was just talking to Krista, she's like, that was so hard to stay so surface level. I want to dive into some of these areas. But we wanted to save time to make sure you guys can ask the questions that are specific to your heart, your situation, and I'm right there with you. It was kind of funny. My wife is back there, and she kind of jokes. I'm going to kind of make fun of our family for a minute, but she's like, "Why you got hired as a family pastor? Don't you have to have like a really good family, to be the family pastor?" And it's like, I guess not. I don't know, but we are going through the exact same things you guys are going through, and we have great children. I love them, but they're teenagers and they're going through the same things and we're going through this for the first time together as a family as well. It's the first time we've ever had a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and before that it was 16 and 13, and so one of the things that really struck a chord with me that Krista shared was are they lovable or what? That was really important for our kids to know that no matter what, they were lovable. And some of my reactions early on, the first time I found some of these things or dealing with certain things, whether they're lying or whatever along the scale, and you see that and you're like, and my reaction wasn't great. And I had to put that face on, and I learned that I need them to know that I make mistakes, they're gonna make mistakes, I love them no matter what. And I want to encourage you guys to take that opportunity the next time it comes up, because they're going to mess up again, and you can take that opportunity to say, and we've done this and it takes multiple times, as you guys know, but listen, buddy, I don't care. I love you so much. It doesn't matter to me, that we're going to work through this. There's consequences for sure, but listen, I'm your dad. I love you. And nobody, I feel like I say this probably more than anything is, we're your parents. We love you more than anybody else in the world, and we're looking out for you more than I think there's other people that love you too, but we want the best for you. And so even when there's discipline or when we say no, it's because we love you so much that we need to make these decisions for you. And I'll share one last quick story as you guys are thinking through any questions that you have. But one thing that I also, as I failed a lot as a father, I've also had some good successes occasionally. And but I know that just recently a story of, I want you guys to also take an opportunity to praise character. I think a lot of times we are really good at praising an action. Hey, you made the catch. You got the hit. You got the A. We're so proud of you. You are awesome. You're doing great in school. We're so glad you did this and you accomplished this. But I've learned that the more I praise their character, recently my son he's playing football and he wants to play so bad, and he's right there fighting for playing time, and we said, listen buddy, we want you to be right next on the coach's hip. And I would tell you, in the past he would say, he'd be disengaged, he'd be frustrated, he'd be mad. But man, he followed the coach back and forth the sideline, listened on every huddle, every timeout. He was encouraging his teammates, and we kept telling him to do that. And he's frustrated, he wants to be out there, and we were encouraging him to be, better in his character, be a better teammate, no matter what. And man, I'll tell you, a few weeks ago, he did that to a T. And he came off the field that game and he was super frustrated. Like, I did everything you told me to do. I followed him. I was ready. I encouraged my teammates. And I'm like, I could, if you went on the field and made 100 tackles, I could not care more than watching that whole time you were sitting there doing that. And I'm going, dude, that's character. And so I needed to pull him aside after the game and just encourage him about who he was as a young man, the way he encouraged his teammates. And sure enough, the next week, when coaches see that, teachers see that, parents see that, and who do you think they want on the field is somebody and he got an opportunity the next week when they needed somebody. Sometimes that doesn't always happen that way, but for me, it was important that we recognized not an accomplishment. He was frustrated, and he was kind of blown away that, man, they noticed that I did, the right things. And so, I don't know, just a little encouragement for you guys. It's a small thing, but, their effort is way more important, right? Their attitude, their words that they choose. The controllables are things that we want to encourage them with, not just the outcomes, right? So anyway, what questions do you have for this crew up here? And we've got Nikki and we've got Molly over here. That if you have a question, go ahead and pop your hand up, and they'll come next to you. So, question.
Hi. So you were talking about that when they have these behaviors, vaping, sexting, cyberbullying, that kind of thing, that there's truly like a bottom iceberg issue. So now I'm wondering if we've encountered some things like that and we're trying to engage them in conversation, how do we avoid being the helicopter parent by not trying to help them with their own self-awareness? Like what kind of open-ended questions should we ask them to help them tell us what that point of the iceberg is, rather than us thinking we kind of know and making suggestions to them?
So are you thinking, like, rather than diagnosing them, having them tell you? Cool.
Yeah, I think Krista said this really well, but I like to think of validation as the bridge to anybody. If you think about that in business relationships or anybody, if you understand somebody and you feel understood, and you're on the other end of that, you connect with them instantly, right? And you feel safe, you feel heard, you feel valued, all those things. So especially as a child, when they look to us and they're already thinking, well, there's this big gap, how do we bridge that gap? Just slowing down to listen. And those questions might be, first starting with a validation statement. Wow, that sounds so tough. Like, man, how did you do that? Wow. And really, in your tone, your expression, and your presence communicates so much, right? Just being there, making time for them, giving them the eye contact, and in the silence. A lot of times we feel the silence, usually in about 2 to 4 seconds we start talking. So if we just sit there, and you can even count if you want, like count to 5, like silently, but give them that time and validate that, and hey, tell me more about that. Wow, what else happened? And really be caring and curious in your tone. So like when Krista showed the iceberg, I think of the water line as the because line too, just like she was teaching, because they're feeling these things and exhibiting these behaviors because of these other things. So always be curious and ask yourself what else is going on. As if it's behavior, there's something driving that behavior, but that validation, I think, is that instant connection.
It's a really hard line to walk when you're a really good parent and you love your kids so much, to not become a helicopter parent. And I hear about it all the time, like, what's the fine line between helping my child and becoming this crazy helicopter parent that's trying to solve all their problems, so when they go off to college they don't even know what to do when they get a sore throat. That's what we don't want. But I think one of the things that you can do when you're having a conversation with your child is to kind of give them confidence, like, you know what, you've solved a lot of hard problems before. What do you think you're going to do? I think you can handle this. Give it a try. What do you think? If they're talking about a bully or a cyberbully, how are you going to handle it? You don't want to jump in and say, well, here's what you need to do. You need to go. And sit back and, again, give it some time and listen. And if they say, I really don't know what to do, I just say, well, let's think of some things. You know, if you could do anything, what do you think you would do? And lead them through the process where they're learning that they can solve their own problems. You need to let your kids know, in all of your unconditional love for them, I have confidence in you. You're smart. You've handled hard things before, and you can do this. Now, let them fail. I mean, they may make a bad choice and go in and do something dumb, and then they'll come back to you again. But there's nothing wrong with letting them fail with the dumb little stuff when they're in elementary school or middle school or high school. But pull back, and you'll know. I mean, when they're at the end of their rope and when they're really, really asking you, then you can come in and say, well, I don't know. Have you tried this? I'm not sure. You tell me. Does it feel right? But let them know that you have confidence in them. They're smart and they're good kids.
I'll add one little tiny thing to that is stay the course with them. You might see something the minute they start explaining their feelings, you're like, oh, we have a serious case of perfectionism, right? And it's just so obvious to you, but they don't see that. And so helping them through, they'll get there asking like those deep, deep questions. I had a student her freshman year, and I just knew what the problem was. Like, I knew it. When she would just break down crying and having these episodes, it was exactly that, feeling like everything had to be so excellent that she couldn't even put one foot out of line. But if I tell her that this is why she's feeling the way it's feeling, or why she's feeling that way, it's not the same as if she comes to that conclusion. Well, she was just in our group that we had this past spring, and we did an exercise called What's the Root? And the point of this is to keep kind of digging, having them self-reflectively dig. Okay, so here's your fear. Your fear is you're afraid to go to college. Well, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid that I won't find any friends. Okay, well, what happens if you don't find any friends? Well, I'll be alone. Well, what if you are alone? You know, kind of digging up that. But then when she got to the bottom of that and was able to see, okay, this feels like it's the rock bottom root. I'm like, is that your bottom? Is that the root? Yeah. Okay, cool. And then we tied that back, and she's like, oh, I am obsessed with being like excellent all the time. And I was like, yes, you are. But she and it took 4 years to get there, but she got there. And I didn't have to give her that information. I coached her through some stuff, but she got there with the guidance, if that makes sense.
Our teens have so many influences. I feel like what they're getting from their teachers, what they're getting from their peers are completely like counteracting everything we've taught them, and they're coming to this point where they're kind of hitting a wall and they're trying to figure out, like, what do I think? And it's really hard as a couple. I think we tend to shut them down too early to where, oh, no, that's not right. Like, let's correct that thought. Let's correct that, what your teacher's telling you, that's not how we've raised you, and that's not how, our family does it. And so then how do you listen long enough, but then also guide them back to, well, what do you know to be true? And then I think, I have a 16-year-old, and she's really trying to figure out what it is that she knows to be true. She's kind of in that seeking, I guess, mode where, is God real? Is, what you're telling me real? Like, you've always taught me this, but what makes it real for me? And so it's just a really hard time, and learning when to listen and when to guide, and I think we're really struggling with that.
I know exactly what you're saying about the schools. Trust me, and the messages that they get at school, and that's especially hard when teachers are telling them something that doesn't match with what your values are as a family. Make sure your kids know what your values are as a family. And the best time to do that is not when they're bringing up something that happened at school or something they heard from a peer, but generally throughout your day. You're living your core values, I hope, and you're showing them what your family values are. Kids really don't really listen. I mean, they really don't. What they do, and they hear these things from the teachers, but what they really do is they watch. And they watch you, and they're watching you all the time. And they're watching how the two of you interact, and how you interact with the siblings, and how you talk to the person at King Soopers, and how you behave on your way to church and on the way home from church. They're watching. And if you're living your core values, they're going to know. Now, when they come home and say, my teacher said this, well, talk to them. It's like what we were talking about before. Use your critical thinking skills. What do you think about that? Do you want to do some research about that? Because if you tell them that's wrong, like I said, they're watching, they're not listening. If they come home and say, I don't know if I believe in God, you just say, okay, that's hard for me to hear, but I understand, and I know that you have good thinking skills, and I guess the most important thing to me is that you're a good, honest person with integrity. And that's the bottom line with our family. And The believing in God thing will come along. Trust me, it always does. It's a very common teenage thing to try to freak your parents out by telling them you don't believe in God. And when a parent responds like Krista said, you smile and wow. I mean, you have to be honest. That's hard for me to hear, but okay. I trust that you're going to figure this out.
That's good. Yeah, I think I was going to say the same thing. They have a larger hypocrite sensor in their brain, and so they are completely watching, and they're seeing how you handle situations, how you treat people, and that's kind of where they're getting some of their values, but they're not just going to swallow your values, right, without first checking them. And we don't really want that either, right? We want their faith to be their own. We want them to figure things out, be able to advocate for themselves. And some of the parenting love and logic way curriculum has a lot of that. There's either a helicopter parent or a drill sergeant or a process consultant, basically, or a consultant. So think about that as they grow up. Maybe you're more of a drill sergeant when they're younger, and as they grow older, you're a process consultant. So you're thinking, oh, that's interesting. You did that, huh? Oh, okay. And we don't have to really respond, right? We're just reflecting back what they said, and we're helping them process and, again, come to a conclusion on their own. And they might blow it, and that's okay, but we're still there for them. And that's the main thing that we are as parents, and as Krista was saying too, it's like you're chosen to be their parent. You're the perfect parent for your child. So when you're there for them and you believe in them, there's nothing better you can do as a foundation for them, that they know, even if I fought with my mom or my dad a lot, I always knew and I never doubted that they believed in me. So the three core negative beliefs that I see with people, I've met with clients age 8 to about 75 in private practice. We all have these three negative beliefs, one or more of these, and it's I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable. So if you've ever had any of those thoughts, you're not alone. But a lot of those things are started really young, and we kind of, not purposely find evidence all the time that support those negative lies, right? Whether it's performance or comparison. So I think those core things, that connection, the relationship that you have with them, even when it seems like things are going crazy and you don't know all the answers, but you're there and they can depend on you, I don't think there's anything better than that.
And just a little thing. Keep in mind that hopefully they know that your house is unconditional love. They can screw up and you'll still love them. They don't know that they can screw up and their peers will still accept them. So that is kind of the rub, is wanting to maybe align with the values in your home, but knowing that they might get totally publicly shamed for that at school or kicked out of their social group. There might be a consequence to holding to the values, and that's what's so hard with our culture right now, is the path of least resistance is just to go along with the flow. And we know this in scripture. The narrow path, right, is the path to life. The narrow path is not the easy road. So a way that you can arm your teenagers and kind of equip them is to challenge them to be critical thinkers, but to train from the beginning why you hold a core value. A core value without a why leaves them totally vulnerable to not be able to back that up and not hold to it. And then when their friends challenge it, it's like, ugh, I don't know, because my mom said so. It has to be something so much more rooted than that into why do I hold this core value, or why does my family hold this core value?
Make them go to church or don't.
Let me think.
How old?
Yeah, I think at 16, I mean, you still have a lot of influence, and you're the parent, right? It's hard to drag them. I think there's a lot that you can do to help them. If you have some kind of reward system or something that you do that has them like, okay, sorry, you can't do this thing. We're doing church as a family. It's our family activity. This is what we get fed. I understand you're having a tough time, but and it's tough with different churches. I'm sure you guys have a great youth group here, but it's not always available everywhere. So just helping them make connections, and then thinking about that. If they refuse and there's something, where else can they get fed in that way? Can there be a mentor for a short time, some people that you trust that they can talk about spiritual things that they feel safe with? But I don't know, I think it's a tough question at that age, dragging them.
I know. Yeah, I've in my private practice, I saw a couple kids that did some really naughty stuff at church. I'll leave it at that. So I think ultimately you have to decide if that's the mountain that you want to die on. I would say with a 15 or 16-year-old, exactly what Alex said, we're going to church and we're going out for something really good afterwards, or something, and make a lot of times kids just don't want to let you know that you've won. So if you give them a little out, like, well, we're all going to go, shopping for new jeans after church, then they can say, oh, well, maybe I'll go, because of the, so dangle a little thing. But if you're forcing someone and they're really driving their heels in, I wouldn't push it. Because like I said, I've seen parents that have forced their kids to go to church and go to youth group, and some of the kids that really didn't want to go, you didn't want to keep them in your youth group, if you know what I'm saying. So.
Do you guys have any helpful hints on websites or people or seminars on like child-proofing devices? And I have older kids who are young adults, and now I have a 10-year-old, and from then to now it is a different world of parenting, and I'll admit I am clueless in some ways. I do not know how to child-proof it all.
Right, yeah, and technology changes so much, right? And it's hard to keep up on it. We're not all tech savvy. So actually this little piece of paper on your chairs, there's a website on there, my website, relationshipinstitute.org. So I put a lot of resources on there. If you just click on parent and then parent resources and technology and sex education. So if you click on that, there's probably 2 pages worth, and I just checked it this morning just to make sure all the links were up to date. So all of the latest with child proofing, monitoring, parental control apps. There's a lot that we can do as a parent to stay 2 steps ahead, because everything that they learn from their peers is just so quick, right? How to get around things. So yeah, there's a lot of resources there for you. So
one of the things, and again, if you're looking underneath the iceberg at developmental level and you're talking about a 10-year-old, there's a big difference between the controls you're going to put on a 10-year-old's phone than on a 17-year-old's phone. And I think that everyone pretty much agrees in all the research recently that they've done and the things that we found out in working with kids is that you really have to structure kids' time on social media and on their phones, and really, really limit the time. And I don't care if the kid's 10 or if they're 18, they should not be sleeping with their phone. The phone needs to be taken away and put at a family charging station. I would say, depending on the age of the child, even a 10-year-old might turn it into you after school. A 17-year-old might turn it in at 9 o'clock, even though they don't plan on going to sleep till 11, because nothing good happens on phones at night. Horrible things happen on phones at night, so nobody should have a phone at night. I'll also caution you, there are really good apps out there, but I have also seen so many angry kids because the parents start stalking them on their phones. And this creates such a, we were talking about empowering your kids. I know you make good decisions. I trust you. And when you begin to really get in, parents are finding out everything. Kids do need some level of privacy, as scary as that is. But I've seen so many angry kids, and it's really hard to repair the damage when kids feel like their moms, are constantly watching them. It's kind of creepy if you think about it. I know you want to, but we can't. So everything in moderation, balance that out, and think about it developmentally.
Yeah, I think when it comes to safety, though, we have to look at that. And I think everything, when you take a phone away, if you take a phone away because as just a discipline thing, you're taking away a lot of things, right? Their music, their connection with other people. So if I do a suicide kind of safety plan with people, with kids, a lot of it they have to use on their phone, right? Not just an 800 like hotline, but to contact their friends if they're really feeling suicidal or something, or listen to music, their playlist. And so think about that. If you're just taking the phone away as a discipline, if there's some other way that they can still access these other very helpful coping tools.
So I just want to piggyback on hers here. I've got a 12-year-old boy. He's got an old iPhone. The school wanted him to have a Chromebook, and he's got an Xbox. And it's hard to get a handle on. So each device does have its own. Apple has their screen time. Google has their Google Family Link, and Microsoft also has a way to manage all their stuff on their devices. And it's crazy to try to keep up with all of it. I don't work for any of these people, but we do use a Disney Circle device, which kind of does encompass everything. But still, he found a way to get around. I mean, I've got all that stuff locked down on him, and he still found a way to get around that. So it is burdensome. It's a big deal, and if you have any other resources besides that, we would all be welcome to hear about them.
I have 3 sons, and they're a little bit older now, but they told me a long time ago, they said, "Mom, it's ridiculous. We'll get around it." I mean, there's always a way around it. They're always one step ahead. And I'm telling you, kids can even get in trouble on their Xboxes playing video games with other people. I mean, you don't know who they're playing with, but they're all playing with a lot of people that they don't know. So you might think that, you're monitoring their phone or you're monitoring the Chromebook, but who are they talking to on their Xbox? So it's I wish I had a perfect answer, but yes, it's difficult.
Hi. Can we just talk a little bit about racism? My wife is from East Africa. We have 4 children, 12 and under. And a lot of the issues that my kids deal with are from being the only non-white child in the room. And I think I don't think a lot of times kids are intentionally racist, but certainly there are occasions where they have been. Are there just some guidelines on when to either remove them from the environment or even approach the school, and we've done that on occasions, but also approach other children's parents?
Yeah, that's really hard around here. I went through a very similar thing. When I was 12, I moved from California, a city of 600 plus thousand, to a town in northern Minnesota of 8,000, and I was the brownest kid in town. It's kind of, people were envious of my year-round tan, especially in Minnesota. But it was something that I didn't even know I had to deal with. So definitely at home, the conversations about that, why are you different? How are you unique? Your identity and God's made you, helping equip your children, first of all, to know that they are good, they are perfect in how God made them, is very primary for them, right? Because they're going to hear that from you, but they need to be able to build that up. I've had some people go to principals and say, "Hey, I've heard comments, or these specific kids said these things to my kids," and really being persistent with that, saying, "This happened again, it happened again, just like yesterday, it's happening again," and really people who are in the administration, making sure that you're being heard, and if you're not being heard by that person, go above them and go above them. But I think something definitely has to be done on a system level. But yeah, don't quiet your voice of something like that. I think it needs to be addressed for sure.
I mean, that's bullying, regardless of color, and that always has to be addressed. And I know coming from the schools that the schools need to hear about that. Absolutely. I know I can think of an incident last year where in the prep school, the younger kids where I work, that one of our African American girls came in and she got new braids, and they were gorgeous, and I mean just really long, beautiful braids. And a lot of the kids in the school were touching them, and that was very offensive to her. That people would just not think to reach out and touch her braids. You know, it was invasion of her space, and it made her feel really uncomfortable. Well, what we found out was the kids didn't really know. They were just interested and they were curious. And that just took a little bit of education. The mom called the principal called me. I talked to the teacher, and the teacher had kind of a nice informational group with the kids just about not only her, but about personal space and things like that. But absolutely don't hesitate. And if kids are being mean, that's just bullying. There's no room for that in school.
So going back to like the technology thing, how can we like equip our kids to handle that technology? You know, they're gonna be faced with it. They're gonna go to their friend's house where their technology is not monitored. It's not hooked up to anything. How can we best equip our kids in that situation so that they can choose the right thing? If, you know, is there anything we can do as parents to equip them to handle this technology world?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to that relationship with them and talking to them and sitting with them, not having the shocked face, having the neutral grace face, and being able to, yeah, to be with them. And let's talk about this. You're going to go over to your friend's house. What do you guys usually do? Well, Mom, we just hang out. Okay, what is that, right? Tell me more. So you guys probably going to play Xbox, or what's going to go on? Because that family may not have very similar values or beliefs that we do. So I'm just curious, you know, before you can go over there, I really need to know. And of course, depending on the age too, I want to talk to the parent. We're still talking to their friends, their children's parents, friends' parents, when they're 17, 18, right? You have to know when you're drawing that line, but what are you guys doing, and what will you do if this happens? Oh, well, don't worry about it, I'll be fine. Well, what are you going to do? And then bring up those scenarios. What do you do if someone puts something on their phone that you shouldn't be seeing, and they show you, hey, look at this, and they make fun of you, and you're all alone because you're not engaging in what they're doing? What are you going to do? So again, when you're caring and curious and you're anticipating what the typical things are going to happen there, and you just have that safe conversation with them, then they're starting to think for themselves. And then maybe afterward you can say, how did you do when we talked about that? Like, did you do okay? Like, oh yeah, I did good, Mom. And at least they know that you're aware and you're not prying too much, but you're caring about how they might handle these, you know, likely situations.
Yeah, relationship is honestly your biggest tool. I know we want something that feels a little bit more tangible, like a 5-step program, or like a here's what you do when this happens. And unfortunately, we can't provide that, and all of these things change so often. But if you have the type of relationship with your kid where it is kind of that back and forth, like ease that you have, where they go to a friend's house, and if something happens, they actually feel comfortable to come to you and be like, ugh, guess what happened? Like, that was super awkward. And if they can process it with you, then at least they have a next step. So let's say you have a daughter who doesn't feel like she can talk to you, and then a guy asks her for a nude picture or sends her one. What is she to do about that? Now she's kind of isolated, wondering, do I send something back? Do I not? How do I respond to this? Do I not? And that's something, I give that example because it's really awkward for you and for her, and it's super vulnerable, and it's weird, and you don't want to talk about it, and you don't want to know about it, and it's easier to be like, she would never do that. But it's so much better if she can come to you and be like, ugh, look, what do we do? And you can address that together. That is everything. So it goes back to the core values. Do they know their core values? Do they feel worthy enough to say no to these things or yes to these things? And it's a lot. This is why I do not envy being a parent in this time.
We have time for probably one more question.
Hi. Thank you for being here and using your gifts to pour into our kids. We have a child that isn't officially diagnosed with anxiety, but it's definitely leading down that road. It's been building up for a couple of years, and my question is, how do you handle the school system kind of giving you the perspective and the view that everybody's protected and everybody is a concern for them, but this one particular child keeps repeating bad behavior, and it's now created anxiety for our daughter, and she keeps asking to go to a different school. We've talked about it, and we say, as kids, we didn't have the option to go to a different school. This is where we're at right now. Let's keep trying it, kind of thing. But at what point do you say, okay, enough's enough? Because I know the second we move the school, it'll be the same issues, just different group of kids.
I can speak to that a little bit because I did switch schools halfway between high school. So did freshman, sophomore year one school, junior, senior year at another school. This is my mom in the front row, if you want to know. So she got to actually live in that question. And sophomore year was so hard for me, and I wouldn't call it anxiety. I don't know what I would call it. I was walking through an eating disorder, really depressed, spent a lot of time alone, eating lunch in the bathroom, just like I could not deal. I don't know how else to say that, just couldn't, and like disappeared inside myself. And then I'll let you guys talk about what you think, but from someone who experienced that, I didn't feel like I could have gone any farther at that school. And that doesn't mean that I couldn't have. That doesn't mean that I couldn't have grown from it. But I am so thankful that my mom was like, okay, let's see what we can do, because then when I switched, I actually did thrive. So I ended up on a team. I made a lot of new friends. I was on student government. Like, the person that I was kind of like reemerged because the circumstances changed. And you guys all know this. If you're at a school where you follow like elementary all the way through, things that happen when you're in third grade follow you to sophomore year. Everybody just has opinions. There's all this stuff. What starting a new school did for me was just clean slate. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have judgments of anybody. Nobody had judgments of me. And I just got to like be. So it can be a good thing. That doesn't mean that it has to be the route that you take. That's just a personal thing that I experienced.
Yeah, and if it's not easy to move, or you're trying to help her grow and deal with these things and advocate for herself, I would probably talk to a counselor, and really slow down. What happens when this other person does this thing? What specific thing? What do you do? How do you feel? What do you need in that moment? A lot of it is just these real critical moments that we might say, oh, that ruined my whole day. And that's all I'm thinking about, is that classroom where this person's going to be in, versus how do we breathe on the way to class? How do we distract ourselves, be focused in this, and really create a lot of tools and thoughts and really slow the process down. This way she can maybe feel more empowered and confident. And because I think if she was able to overcome that, she would probably be stronger, and the next person that comes, and we're going to have that throughout our lives, right? She's going to be able to like, oh yeah, remember when I did this last time? And you can bring that out in her. Remember that girl way back then? Like, you totally did this. Like, that was amazing. Remember that? Okay, just thought you'd like to, remember that, and then see if she can apply it again. But, yeah.
Is she feeling unsafe? Okay. Well, safety's a big issue. If there's somebody there that's not a safe person to be around, then that's definitely an administrative conversation you have to have. Just looking at anxiety in general, I mean, there's a lot of weird kids in school these days that make me uncomfortable. Truly. I think a really good starting point with anxiety, obviously you can take her to a counselor, work on coping strategies, things like that. But a good conversation to have is anxiety is actually a good thing that we have. It's an emotion that's important. It helps keep us safe. It alerts us when there's danger around us, when something's not right. Acknowledge your anxiety. Smile, shake its hand, say, okay, anxiety, you're telling me that something is not right around here. And just teach them that, it's what Krista was talking about. We live in an Instagram world where everything's glossed over and everybody's happy. And to teach our kids that, you know what, it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be nervous. When you give a speech, it's normal and healthy to be nervous. When you're around a weird kid, being anxious is your gut's reaction to this isn't okay.
Angie, Krista, Alex, thank you guys so much.
Thank
Would you guys
you.
please give them a round of applause? Krista, real quick before we leave, and I'm going to close this in prayer, but could you tell us real quickly in 30 seconds a little bit about this parenting class? And we'll be sending this information to you as well.
Yes, so this parenting class is something that we've been doing for about 2 years, and we've seen a couple hundred parents in this course and have found that it is incredibly helpful to them because it creates a space to talk and communicate, but then also learn at length about these things. We do it in a 10-week class, but we're going to do the first 5 here with this church this fall. And so that's what this is. If you didn't get this, we'll send it out in the email with the slides, but on there you'll see the dates and then a little description of it, and then you can reserve your spot on the events page at growabove.com. So if you know anything about counseling and if you've ever paid for a counseling session, you know that it's expensive. Sometimes a counseling session can be up to $130. We charge $25 per course or $100 for the whole thing. So technically all 5 sessions are less than 1 counseling session, and we always have our mental health team here to dive into those. So if that's something you're interested in, go to our website, sign up, and I think you guys will have information at the church going forward.
That's right. That is amazing.
And then, before I forget, for you guys here tonight, when you go to checkout, use the promo code JOURNEY, all caps, JOURNEY, and you'll get another 10% off of those courses. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey guys, I wanted to thank you guys for coming again tonight and giving us this opportunity to partner with you as parents, and really that's what we hope to do. Some of this is we don't have all the answers. I remember several years ago we had a young man, and it's happened since, but we had a young man take his life at the school I was at, and I had one of his teammates call me and ask me like, what's going on? What do I do? How do I handle this? And I didn't have the answer, but at least I could love on him, be there with him, be a voice, pray with him, and just know that I'm there for him. And some of that is just going to be for us. We're going to be there for each other. And, we do some of the practical things. We have our kids turn their phones in. And then we learned we also have to have them turn their computers in because they can get on their computers. And then we had to learn to take their Xboxes and shut those down at night. And then we had to start finding all the old phones as well because those can get Wi-Fi access that are no longer in use, but they find them in an old drawer, and then they can get on those and start messaging through Instagram and all that stuff. And it's amazing. They can work around all of it, and that's why we have to continue to capture their hearts. We have to continue to love on them and let them know they are lovable no matter what, that their identity is rooted in Christ, and that we will continue to live it out like they were saying at home. If they don't want to go to church, they're going to get church all week long at home too, because we're just going to live it out. Maybe not preaching at them, but we're going to live out the gospel message in front of our children in a way that they're going to see the truth. They're going to seek the truth, and they're going to want it because they're going to see the lies in front of them. They're going to be attracted to them just like we are, right? But they're going to fall away from those when they know that the truth is what sets them free. And as we continue to minister to their hearts and love on them, that truth that we share with them about the gospel message, about who Jesus is, they got to have that relationship of their own one day anyway. So you asked about, do you force them to go to church? I'd say yes, first of all. But if they don't want to go and it's a losing battle, we got to pray. We got to join together in prayer. And we got to know the power of prayer with all of these things. And I'm so thankful for my wife. She's been praying for our children every day since they were born about many things, including their spouses and who their friends are and where they end up at school. And it's just amazing what the power of prayer can do. And so we're never going to ignore that, but there's practical things that we can do. There's a funny commercial, and I'll wrap it up, but one of the reasons I found that they were using an old iPhone was because I got that Xfi app for Xfinity. And I don't know if you've seen the commercial where, like, the daughter's in bed and the guy's climbing up the window and he busts in. He goes, "You must be Steve's phone," and he's like in the windowsill, like, but he knew because he just logged on to his Wi-Fi. It's crazy, this technology world we live in, but we have to dive in. We have to learn. Our kids turn their phones in and stuff, and they know that we read their texts. We know that we read their messages and stuff, but we love them no matter what. And we just want to capture their hearts. And so anyway, let me close this in prayer. And I would encourage you to get signed up for some more practical learning opportunities with Krista. And thanks again, Alex and Angie and Krista, for your message tonight. Heavenly Father, God, we ultimately just put all of our trust and hope in you, God. We know that you have the wisdom around the end from the beginning. You know the beginning from the end. You know that you have crafted the hearts of our children, the makeup, the design, the color, just the attitudes and the personalities of each of our children, and how special and unique and perfect and wonderfully made each of them are. And may we help draw out those gifts and strengths that they all have. May we be the parents that they need and deserve, and continue to grow in our own skills and wisdom. But God, ultimately, we place them in your hands and in your care. We love you so much, Lord. And just watch over our children and our families. We love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.